You're on Run for the Hills with Amber Pritchard
And Stacia Sobey.
woo. Okay, so tell me what you do.
Well, I am an LPC, licensed professional counselor, a trauma-informed therapist, and I specialize in marriage, couple, family therapy, and then later on went back to school to become certified in play therapy.
What's that?
So play therapy is where I work with kids and teens, and we really use play as their means of making meaning and working through any themes of trauma.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And so how long have you been doing that?
I have been doing this since 2016.
Wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a
So,
long
yeah.
time.
So it's been a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so I see you have some notes there.
I've got lots of things to say. So it's a big topic, domestic violence. And yeah. So just talking about how domestic violence, it really, um, it's a pattern of repeated, you know, pain and trauma that someone goes through. And a lot of people, the big question is, why don't people leave, for men and women that go through it. And I want to just hope to shed some light on like what trauma is, how it affects the brain, um, how it affects, the trauma survivors, even now. I want to talk about how the brain affects just how it affects our bodies and how we're thinking, and then also just give people some hope on next steps of what to do when it comes to how to get out of that relationship when they are, when they've properly made plans to do so.
Yeah. So I guess what made you want to get into the trauma therapy? Like what kind of sparked that?
Well, I would have to say just seeing a lot of family trauma throughout. I was a part of a women's ministry, when my kids were little. It's called Mothers of Preschoolers, MOPS. And every person that came in had a story, and I had a story. And I was able to see how, like, women, they would go through a lot of serious things in their marriages and their families. And it really affected the kids, it affected everybody. And I was able to see how, it just trickles down and how their husbands responded to them, how, domestic violence, it happens to men and women across, all socioeconomic status, race, religions. It's, rich and poor. It's every, culture out there. So it's not just, oh, it's the, the Christians, or, oh, it's the,
Yeah.
a certain demographic. Domestic violence, it really occurs throughout, all people. And so I was able to see like, wow, this is a big deal. And then also just really seeing like I wanted to help people and families.
So what did you think when you heard my story?
I just was heartbroken. I was really heartbroken for you.
Mhm.
And it just really choked me up thinking that someone could bring you to a place to where you felt so hopeless and hurt,
Yeah.
completely just shattered, to
Yeah.
where you felt like you had to hide and you felt like you couldn't bring, that side to your friends and family.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that domestic, just a lot of trauma happens behind closed doors. And no one knows what really happens behind, in a relationship except the two people. And
Right.
just seeing how there can be two sides to one person and how you really had to protect him.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy because I've gotten messages still from people after they heard was like, your life would, look so beautiful and like, nobody ever knew that you went through that or, I'm like, well, nobody's perfect. Like, a lot of people go through similar things like that. If it's not that, it's sexual abuse or some kind of trauma,
Absolutely.
and it's sickening.
It is.
So, that's why I wanna do this podcast, and I wanted to bring you on because, it's hard for me to explain, you know, what the trauma does to the body and the mind, and, like, I know quite a bit, but it's hard to put it in words. So I'm not a therapist. So I'm really happy that you're here. And I hope that, you can shed some light on this
Yeah.
and kind of, help other women who are hearing this message.
Yeah. Well, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, so domestic violence, I think we've already covered it. It covers all religions, races, cultures, status, symbol, all of the things, right? And so, because it does attack our nervous system, because it's a repeated pattern of behavior,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's an ingrained thing that we become desensitized. We start to think it's our normal. And then we start to question our own identity as a person, our own intuition. We start feeling like we can't trust ourselves. And it's a crazy making cycle of abuse, truly. I mean, it's just this addiction cycle. And I want to kind of get to like why and how does this happen? And so when we're talking about trauma, I want to back up a tad. So I'm going to use this hand model. It's called Dan Siegel's hand model of, the brain, of how trauma affects the brain. And I use it whenever I'm talking to the littles that I and the teens and parents and people that come into my office. And so here is your brain. And, my wrist is the brain stem. And this is where all of, your body's vital functions, automatic things happen, like your heartbeat, your breathing, things you don't have to think about. And then the palm, this middle area, is your emotional house. That's where the amygdala is. That's where love and fear are centered. That's where when fear is going off and it's saying, fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn, right? So that's right in the center of your brain. And my fingers right here, for people that are listening, that is the prefrontal cortex. And so the prefrontal cortex is truly the part of the brain that brings rationality to things, the cause and effect. It brings logic. You're able to think clearly, objectively. You're able to have, it's kind of I would call it like my math part of my brain.
Mm-hmm.
The emotional middle part is what gets triggered. So whenever we have a sight, any kind of, our senses, when we have a trigger, so you may have a trigger, you might hear a song that was really important to you guys, or a certain smell, or hear some kind of, a yell that sounds like the person that will trigger the middle part of your brain, the amygdala, and it will just, you know, it just screams fear, fear, fear. And when that's so intense, the prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain, it completely just goes offline. And I just raise my fingers here to show that it flips to where that part of the brain is not truly even, it's not really working. It's hindered. And so that's why when people are triggered, they act in ways that, they might have like thoughts of like, oh my goodness, I'm not safe. Um, I'm not okay. There might be a lot of things that occur. For example, I give the example of if I'm walking through the woods and I see, a long wooden, branch. Well, if I was just bit by a snake, earlier in the week, walking along the woods and seeing that branch on the ground, I'm going to jump. It's going to be a huge trigger for me. And even though I am not really in danger, my body is going to respond in such a way that says, I am in danger. I'm probably going to hightail it out of there. I'm going to, have the flight response. But our brains, the prefrontal cortex, because it flips, sometimes we're not able to fully be like, oh, wait, okay, it's just a stick.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I was
So
following
that
that.
trauma, it really affects our bodies. So when the middle part goes off the amygdala, it goes down also into your body. So then it affects when people have panic attacks, it affects their breathing, shallow breathing. They might feel like they can't breathe. They're going to feel very anxious. They might feel really like nauseous. It
Yeah.
affects the things that we're not truly in control of.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
losing weight too, I feel like
yeah,
is
I
one of
remember,
the
yeah, you said that on your earlier podcast, how much the trauma of your relationship, it really affected.
yeah. I think it was the nerves for sure. Just always being
Absolutely.
like on edge and like and I had this is terrible, but I always like I felt like just my health and my odor about my body was just so off, you know?
Yeah.
It was just so off.
Probably just very, very on edge, hyper vigilant.
Yeah. Very on edge all the time.
Hmm.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
And that's also, so panic attacks, anxiety, feeling of on edge, that hypervigilance is just really common when it comes to trauma survivors. They feel like there's danger around every corner, and just also having flashbacks. Some people have night terrors. Some
Yeah.
people have, this, and obviously this is not done, consciously. It's all subconsciously. We're not thinking, oh, hey, I want to feel, I want to feel really bad today.
Yeah.
I want to feel triggered. It's all, and I don't mean to laugh, but it's,
No, it's true though. Like it just sneaks up on you sometimes and you
absolutely.
yeah.
And so it's a subconscious thing and the ruminating thoughts. And then, some women also say, now that they're out of that relationship, they question their worth.
Mhm.
They like really question their, intuition to keep themselves safe and to be
Yeah.
able to, decipher who is a safe person and who's not. And yeah. So
That's very true. Very hard to trust, I feel
absolutely.
like. So,
Yeah. So something that I wanted to really bring light to is some of the statistics for domestic violence. And even though I, meet with clients and we talk about, because I deal with all sorts of things in therapy I mean, it can be just family therapy. And I mean, it's not just domestic violence. It could be other traumas, but the just crazy amount of intimate partner violence that occurs per year is 16 million people in the US.
wow.
And 1 in 2 women and a little over 2 out of 5 men will experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime.
I saw that.
I
I
mean,
saw that last night
it's
actually.
truly crazy making to think that there's that much violence happening.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
I saw the Gabby Petito documentary. I watched it last night
me
and I was
too.
crying at the end and it said there was like 89,000 I think it was missing from domestic violent cases. And I feel like this subject needs more light on it, you know?
It
Because
really
so
does.
many people go through this. And
It
even guys though too. Like you would like there's so many guys. I've had many guys reach out to me and
Wow.
like say they've experienced it too.
Wow.
It's crazy.
I mean, it's really a heavy topic, but I do think, like you said, we need to shed light on it. And really, when things are hidden and in the dark, it's given so much power,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So when we bring it to light and we tell people, and that was going to be something else I was going to say is like, when we are going through something, I think it's really important to tell other people in our life if we can. I mean,
Yeah, I get
tell people, safe people, people that we can trust and rely on. So they can also, partner with us to be able to say, hey, okay, this isn't okay, to validate what you're going through, but then also say, hey, I'm a safe person if you ever need to talk. If you need me to hold on to something for you, if you want to come stay with me for a little bit, you just need a breather, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Gabby Petito, to go back to that story, it was just completely heartbreaking
Yeah.
to watch. As a mother, I just seen her parents on there. I was just like, yeah, I kept tearing up because I thought, I cannot even imagine.
Yeah. And the fact that
Yeah.
that they put her like in the back of the truck, and she was the one out to made look like she was the one who was hitting. She was defending herself because he was slapping her, and there was witnesses saying that he slapped her. And so, when they were in the back of the truck and she was saying like, he was like, "You have a mark right there," and she's like, she doesn't know what to say. She doesn't want to get him in trouble. She loves him. So like, she didn't want to get him in trouble. She was scared. You could tell.
Yeah.
And it's just like they completely ignored that and then put him in the domestic violence hotel. I was mind blown.
I was mortified. And I know those police officers have to be now,
Mhm.
I was just mortified that, yes, he was in a domestic violence, hotel,
Yeah.
a resource given.
Yeah, when it should have been her
I
that was in
know.
it.
It really, really, that story, I mean, it's just completely heartbreaking. I was able to get on the Gabby Petito Foundation,
Oh, yeah?
website today, and I was looking around, and I think there's some really great resources, and I just really support what her family is doing, and
Wow.
it's just
I think I wanna share, like I definitely wanna get on there and, like, research some of that stuff so I can send it to women who have reached out so far.
absolutely. And I also wanted to say, yeah, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-SAFE. So I think that's really important to highlight on here,
Yeah.
that you can call this hotline. And something that really, people always say, okay, just leave, just leave. It's not that simple and it's not that easy,
Yeah, it's really
because
not.
a lot of times these victims are in a relationship where someone has their vehicle, much like, Gabby Petito, her situation. They have, they're financially being abused completely, no access to finances. They are in a situation that the abuser has complete control and power over them. They've been isolated from friends and family. And it's not just a simple, "Hey, let's leave," because another horrible statistic out there is 70% of domestic violence murders, it's when a woman has chosen to actually, after she's left. And so it's really, really dangerous for women to leave. So, in order for them to take the safest route to exit that relationship, it looks like coming up with a safety plan. And so, yeah, I was able to go on the website and just really look at the safety plan. And it looks like opening up a P.O. box prior to leaving. So, all of your mail is going to the P.O. box. It looks like opening up a savings or checking account in a separate bank
Yeah.
with your name on it solely. It looks like, stashing money little bit by little bit. And so sometimes it takes people years to leave. Um, because the reality of the situation is when women try to leave and men try to leave an abusive situation, um, there's a lot of financial abuse that happens, denied of financial resources, but then the whole system is weaponized against, um, the victims and their children.
Yeah.
So then they have to have visits by the abuser.
Mhm.
And so it's just a very dangerous situation. So there needs to be a lot of thought put into, okay, how can we leave? Where can we move? How can we change maybe like where we work, like our hours? How can we take a different route to work? Where can we go to the a grocery store that's different? Really, I mean, it takes a someone that survives this, they have to completely change their entire life and their routine.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of stress on anyone
Mhm.
under good circumstances. And so going back to the trauma of what it does to someone, it can, you know, so when this whole prefrontal cortex, when we go back to the brain model, when the prefrontal cortex flips and the emotional house is just running the show, that looks like, you know, for a person that's living in survival mode, that
Yeah.
looks like mood swings. That looks like having a lot of sensory overload, not being able to handle loud noises, chewing, um, just a lot of anything that's sensory overload, it just overwhelms the system.
Yeah.
That also looks like, irritability, having trouble concentrating, and it also looks like memory loss. So a lot of times, I think it's really important for police departments to know, and hopefully they have trauma-informed therapists on staff, or at least to call in situations that a lot of victims, they have trouble recalling what really happened to them when in a domestic violence situation because their memory and their recall is so completely just hindered because of that prefrontal cortex is just flipped.
That makes so sense.
So when people
Makes so much
say,
sense.
how come you don't remember all of the details of, XYZ? They truly cannot because they had to disassociate in order to just survive being in a horrific situation. So when they come out the other side, they're like, I wasn't there mentally. I had to check out to live,
Yeah.
to be able to live.
Yeah. I will say, like, after I was in that relationship, I have memory loss now. Like, I sometimes, like, I think I'm like, "Oh, shit, like, that happened. I
Mhm.
forgot about that one," you know?
Yeah.
And it's like we block it out,
Yeah.
so we can just, like, kinda keep living.
Yeah. Well, you have to.
It's crazy.
Sometimes you have to in order to get through the other side of it, to go through it,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So, going back to just all of the things that can affect the brain and affect a person. So when they're going through this. So like I was saying, just changing up a routine when a woman or a man has to leave a violent, situation or relationship. So like I said, the change of routine anyway under great circumstances, just moving across the country, having wonderful things happen. That is it's a positive thing, but it's also a positive stressor. It causes a little bit of stress. You have to we just moved recently. It's been about 2.5 years ago. We moved across the country and just the change of scenery, going to a new grocery store, all of the newness, right? It can make someone like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling really overwhelmed.
Mhm.
But then when you put someone that has been in a traumatic situation and they have to move across the country, it's incredibly hard. It's like jumping over, 100 more hurdles
Yeah.
for them just to be able to get up out of bed, to be able to focus and put their kids first and be able to like take care of, their animals or, their fur babies, or their children, their family. And so changing up the scenery, changing, the routine is just really important for women and men that are trying to leave this relationship. But the situation where people say, well, why don't you just leave? Well, people don't realize that when a woman or a man gets into this relationship, they are love bombed like
Mhm.
crazy in the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, you're thinking, this is the man of my dreams.
Yeah.
He is saying he's like the only person that knows how you feel, how you understand things. Like
Mhm.
it's like your heart, everything you've ever wanted your heart to feel. It's like they're experts, and what's and just crazy is they know. I mean, it's just across the board. These abusers know how to do this so well
Yeah.
to get a woman to fall very hard. So then whenever they do isolate and then criticize their steps in this, right? It's like they're breadcrumbing, their victim. Then the victim thinks, oh, wait, this isn't really who they are. Who they are is the person I met in the beginning,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm. That makes so much sense.
And, so then you spend the rest of your relationship trying to get back to who they were in the beginning.
Yeah.
when really it was just a manipulation the entire time. And it's just a way of having control and power
Yeah.
over that person.
Yeah.
And so it's a situation to where this, person cannot, the victim cannot just be like, oh, hey, okay, easy peasy, let me snap out of it. They're probably thinking, hey, I feel confused because this person was fantastic for 10 months. And then like one day he
Yeah.
slapped me.
Yeah. Like
Maybe,
some borderline trust issues where you're like, okay, now.
yeah, is this an isolated event? And so it
Yeah.
just starts like trickling in. Things just start to not make sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So then these women or men, they think I maybe I'm just gonna have to, try harder, right? I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to work for the love. I'm gonna
Yep.
have to, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I need to wear a certain way, do a certain thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So it gets us to where we have to work for our love, right? Work for our value in a relationship versus just being loved unconditionally for who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some therapy besides out of going to therapy? What if people can't afford it? What
Oh.
are some therapeutic things that they can do?
So if they can't afford going to therapy, there are a lot of, well, I shouldn't say a lot because I mean, back before I became a therapist, I wouldn't have known these resources. And especially in trauma, I would not be able to know of who to turn to at that moment. But I will say, really going back to the five senses of grounding themselves. So, we have, our sight, our taste, our smell, our hearing, and our touch, right? So it goes back to when we feel triggered and we're like, oh no, and you can really feel it coming on. A lot of people feel it in their gut. Some people feel it like it's kind of coming up through the chest. You feel like it's going to strangle you, right? A lot of people and children, they will even say, oh, my fear and my, trigger, it's in my elbow.
Yeah.
And they're not lying. It's our somatic experience can be somewhere else in the body. And so I just say, hey, let's ground ourselves. And so that looks like putting on, just very grounding music for you. That looks like putting on just calm, something that is going to help regulate your emotions. So whenever you feel like you're on this roller coaster,
Mhm.
it's like, okay, how can I calm myself down? It's talking to yourself saying, I'm not feeling okay right now. I'm going to validate that I'm feeling a lot of fear right now. I'm feeling danger. It's just validating all of the emotions that are coming up for you in that moment and saying, all right, I'm going to stick with this for just a few moments. It's not forever. It's going to pass. And you feel it and you breathe deeply through it, in through your nose, out through your mouth. And then saying, all right, I'm going to find five things that I can. And a lot of therapists will say, Stacia, this isn't the order of what to do things. But in the moment, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Just look for five things while you're breathing, five things that you can see in the room, or maybe you're outside, and just name them in your mind. Okay. Flowers, the lamp, water, really just name different things, right? And then, four things you can touch,
That's a good one.
sensory. Um, and then I want you to think of, three things that you could smell, like
That's a good one.
recall. And so obviously if you can't smell something right now, you need to just try to, it's like conjure up the memories of like when you were, young, going to the mall for Christmas and thinking, what was it like? Of course, I was, the 80s at the mall back then, completely different 80s and 90s kid. Going to the mall was like, hey, let's go get a coffee in the mall,
Mhm.
pretzels, and
Mhm.
thinking of all those smells. or thinking of like cinnamon or pine trees, Christmas, some just a good memory for you. Or thinking of things that you can taste. Like what's your favorite food? So I try to go back to positive things to to really bring your senses in the moment. So bringing those senses, yeah, your sensories back in the moment to ground you, to really just name the emotion that you're feeling. And it could be 10 emotions at the same time, and that's okay. You're not crazy. Triggers are, it's a real thing. And so naming the emotion, but naming where you feel it in your body.
Yeah.
Saying like, okay, like watching the Gabby Petito documentary last night. I was feeling it big time in my chest and my throat and my, stomach. And I was like just feeling the grief of what her mom and dad, yeah, all of her parents were feeling. And I'm like, okay, I'm feeling this right here in my chest.
Yeah. One of mine is like I tingle,
Mhm.
it's like a tingling sensation.
Yeah.
And like one of the therapists that I went to, she was like, count to 10 and then
Mhm.
count to 10 backwards. I was
Yeah.
like, okay. And then there was another like breathing technique. Like it's like where you breathe in for 8
Mhm.
seconds and you
Yeah.
hold it for 4 and then
Yeah.
you release. I think it was at like 4.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
That's a
that
good
one,
one.
yeah.
That's another one I was gonna say.
Yeah, it is a good one.
And
That one helped quite a bit.
it really does. And I say the secret is to holding your breath.
Yeah.
I Some people are like, that, don't let them pass out. But for
Yeah.
teens, I'm like, the longer you can hold your breath, the better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it does really regulate your nervous system and really bring you back to center.
Yeah. That
And
makes sense.
that counting backwards, what that does is that turns on your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, because you're like, okay, my emotional house, the amygdala, is firing, but then I need to somehow turn back that prefrontal cortex and be able to say, all right, 10, 9, 8. Yeah,
Yeah.
really, that really does help ground a person.
That makes so much sense. So, wrote down some things real quick. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
I just want to ask. Um, so, how long does it usually take um, to heal?
Gosh. Okay, so this is kind of a rough answer. Um, so I want you to think about like if depending on how long, so the severity and the duration of how long um the domestic violence occurred. So if you are in a relationship for, 20 years, right? That's going to take so much, right? That's going to take so much time to heal. But if, you're in a it doesn't really, I guess my point is, it doesn't matter. It's going to take a long time because you're in a position to where you've been abused. And a lot of times you've been abused every day, 365 days. You know, it's, if I leave here and someone assaults me out in the parking lot and I'm obviously not
They
expecting it.
wouldn't. No, I'm
Yeah.
just kidding. They wouldn't.
Like that would take a while for me to like heal from because it's like, whoa, an
Yeah.
isolated event. But someone that's supposed to love you and that you trust when they abuse you, whether it's emotional, psychological, verbal, or physical or sexual, that really messes with a person. So, a lot of times it takes like 7 to 10 years to truly heal. Um, but I will say, because our brains are neuroplastic, that means they can change. So, what basically happens is our brains can completely heal over time, not over time, but when we actually go to therapy, actually over time, it doesn't just heal by itself. People say, oh, time heals all things. No, it really doesn't. But when we go to therapy and we really are intentional about, you know, getting help and healing. So EMDR is a big one. in therapy. So eye movement, desensitization, repetition. That's also a great modality for trauma, people that have gone through a lot of trauma. Um, but then also just knowing that it does take a while. It takes a while, but not everyone takes that long. So some people take longer. Some people, um, it just takes maybe a year or two. So I can't really like say, oh,
Yeah.
it just depends on the
Yeah.
person. And if
And
they're going to therapy regularly, it's going to take less time because they're like attending to their emotional health.
right.
Whereas if it's someone that's like, yeah, I might go to therapy once every 2 years, it's gonna take a little bit.
Right. And I will say, like, if you have someone in your family or you're around somebody that is like constantly just draining the life out of you, that are it's just like nitpicking, you know what I mean? Like, remove that person out of your life because you're gonna get in a situation where they trigger you and you're gonna be in that exact same spot because like I've been there. I've had to cut people off.
Yeah,
And I feel like
it's hard to do.
yeah, really hard to do. So,
But it's also when you're in that cycle, like you said, these people that you're close to, right? That they just nitpick, right? But then whenever you're in a relationship, like you were, it becomes an addiction cycle,
yeah.
right? So, um, trauma bonds are real. And so
So glad you brought that up.
I know.
I
I
was
was
about to ask
I
you.
know. I was like, all right, land the plane here. So, because people are like thinking, like, why? How does this still doesn't make, unless you have, and I will say, please don't judge unless you have been through a situation. But trauma bonds, a lot of people think, oh, two people just share a similar story of trauma, and then they're bonded. No, that's not, that's not really what it is. It's basically when an abuser love bombs a person over and over continuously, and there's steps of, trauma bonding. And then they isolate their victim from
Mhm.
family and friends. So then there's, everything is in the dark. So, all sin can grow in the dark, right? And then um basically they start criticizing, right? And gaslighting. And gaslighting is where, someone just makes you think, "Oh, that didn't occur." Like they start to make you feel crazy. And
Yeah.
they think, you start to question your reality of like, "Did I remember that right? Maybe
Yeah.
I'm right." And then they start to manipulate. And then eventually the victim is like, well, maybe they're right. And they start to like slowly just give in a tad, just a little bit of control over time, just slowly and slowly.
Yeah.
And then the victim starts realizing, like, I have like become someone that I don't even recognize. Who
Yeah.
am I? And then it's like, but wait, I want to get back to who we were in the beginning. Who was I? Who was he? Who was she?
Yeah.
Men and women that are victims equally, like who was this person? I want to get back to the person that they really were, because that's when all the dopamine, the hormones, right? The happy hormones were released.
Yeah.
And so in the devaluing phase, it's like there's breadcrumbs. They give like breadcrumbs of like attention. They withhold sex. They ignore you. That like it's very
Mhm.
off and on. Intermittent reinforcement is what they say. And that creates such a trauma bond because it's an addiction cycle.
Yeah.
So our brains can become super addicted to intermittent reinforcement. Um,
Wow.
I mean, yeah, there's a guy named Skinner that used to do a bunch of like, I don't know, research on lab rats. And it's like showing that like reinforcement, intermittent reinforcement, it makes our brains crave that dopamine hit, whether it's from the love bombing. So it's like, a guy love bombs a girl. He starts, manipulating her slowly, criticizing, isolating, gaslighting, and then, abusing her clearly. And then, oh, I'm so sorry, feeling really guilty and sad, maybe blame you in a way. They don't
Yeah.
really hold themselves accountable.
Yeah, one thing that I experienced is, like, when after he would, hit me or whatever he would do, it was always he would love me more.
Mhm.
And so that's all I ever wanted in that relationship
Yeah,
was him to love me
yeah.
because he held out sex on me. And I know that that's wrong. I shouldn't even like really want that in a relationship. I should be genuinely in love and
It's not wrong. Everybody
but
wants to feel connected. It's not wrong.
but yeah, like, they say don't have sex before
Yeah.
marriage, that
Well.
kind of thing. But yeah, like he would always withhold that from me.
Mhm.
And so like when after the fact, he would love me so much. And like it felt like we'd make love for the first time.
Mhm.
And he would always buy me things.
Mm.
And like, like he ripped out my earring out, he ripped my
Goodness.
necklace off, like, or he ripped my new shirt, like, and he would go buy me more things.
Wow.
Yep.
So it sounds like he really, yeah. And when he would do those things, buy you new things, have sex with you, give you attention, all of the things that you craved, right?
Mm-hmm.
During that devaluating phase where he was like not doing those things, your brain was just releasing so much dopamine and it felt so wonderful
Yeah.
that when you were going through the devaluating phase, it was like, oh, I'm just going to hold out. I'm going to hold out because it's going to come back around, and it's obviously subconscious. We're not over
Yeah.
here thinking, hey, I
Yeah.
want to live like this.
Yeah. And it's crazy because like there was some things like in episode 1 that I did leave out. And, I one thing that I did leave out is I called the cops multiple times, but, nothing ever really came about it. He would always leave, he would always flee the scene. And I had an officer bring me a Bible.
Wow.
It was his Bible with his name on it that was engraved. And he was like, I want you to have this.
Wow.
And he was like, if you need someone to lean on, it's Jesus. And I was like, I was just like crying. I was like, wow, like what the heck? I had another officer sit me down at another situation that happened. He was like, I saw a girl last week get stabbed in the eye with a fork by her boyfriend. He's in prison. Like he's in prison. He killed her. He was like, I see dead girls all the time. He's like, because of this just domestic violence. And, like when you're in it, you can't even like comprehend,
Yeah.
what's going to happen. You just go with it because you're so trapped in it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'm so glad you were able to get out.
yeah, me too.
I mean, that's, very, it brings hope that an officer would give you a Bible.
I know, right? There's some good officers and then there's not good officers, but
Very true.
yeah.
Very true. My goodness. Well, I'm so sorry that you had to go through all of that.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
One thing like I don't want though, like people is like, because and I didn't expect this podcast to really like take off, but it has gotten so much light on it. I mean, I've gotten so many streams, so many people reaching out, telling me their stories. And, I don't want the sympathy. I just want people to like, you know, see it as like, okay, well, if she can do it, I can do it type of thing.
Absolutely.
So that's where
You're
I'm at.
strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I love you.
I love you too. By the way, this is my aunt.
I know, we're kind of related. Like,
It's wicked smart.
no. Well, I'm really, really proud of you for sharing your story. And truly, it takes just someone that I don't think people understand unless they've experienced someone close to them or themselves have, experienced it. Like it takes someone that just has the heart of a warrior to be able to even hope again,
Yeah.
to really to be able to think about leaving that situation.
Yeah.
And you, completely changed your whole life.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, when I asked you, I'm like, how long does it take for someone to, get over this situation or, forgive? Like, it took me a year. Now, I forgive, but I'm still working through some of the trauma that I have to deal with. And, for it's been a year for someone else that I know. He was sexually abused, in high school by a police officer. He still doesn't forgive. He's still working on that. So it takes everybody, some time.
It really
Everybody's
does.
different.
And it's okay to say, I'm really angry and I'm not ready to forgive.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's okay.
yeah, it's okay because um I think God knows. He knows what happened and he knows that we have to kind of be angry. It's a part of like our process of being able to grieve something that happened.
Yeah.
And so to regulate our emotions and to be able to like heal our nervous system, it takes a while. It takes a long time. Horrible things happen to amazing people.
Mhm.
And it's making that meaning and making sense of things. Yeah. That people can get really stuck. So, but again, I just want to reiterate, the domestic violence hotline. It's 1-800-799-SAFE.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. But thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks.